Well, by half-assed, I'm not necessarily meaning small. I mean half-assed. I mean poorly organized, poorly ill-conceived, not well-directed, not without a... I'm not necessarily saying that victory has to be assured. Quite to the contrary. I mean, I think in the book it's pretty clear that I say that actually you're probably going to lose, and the odds are very, very long, but that the fight is still worth fighting anyway. All I'm saying is, you want to give this the best possible chance you can, because after all, if you decide to embark on this road, you're risking everything, your life, your fortune, everything. So even the country's future. So you really want to make sure that you do it as intelligently and as thought through as possible. I mean, you see a lot of examples of, people, Americans have a tendency to run off half-cocked, unfortunately. It's the flip side of a part of our culture that I actually really admire, that can-do spirit, like let's roll up our sleeve, let's do something. But the flip side of it is, like we saw it after 9/11, a lot of people fell for the argument. We've got to do something. And I would talk to people and say, well, Afghanistan had really nothing to do with 9/11. And, that was really Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and to some extent Egypt. Well, we got to do something. Like, well, you got to do something, yeah, but not the stupid thing. So, you got to do the right thing. So that's really what I was trying to get at there.
I got that. So you're saying, you don't just do something that has been considered.
Exactly. That's it. And by the way, I didn't mean to imply that I'm the only person who talks about this stuff. I really meant in terms of writing a book.
No. I did not take it personal at all.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm an author
who have these ideas, but in terms of putting out a book in a mainstream publisher, this is kind of a difficult decision for me because I thought, well, I might screw up my career doing this.
Well, that's an interesting thing. What kind of treatment have you received by, media firms, by agents? Have you run into censorship because of, the type of material you address? Has your strip been discontinued because of volatile content? Have you run up against political correctness? And in what form has it manifested its ugly nature?
Well, it's funny. Not nearly as much as you'd think. I suffered a lot more censorship by criticizing Bush in the earlier part of the decade, and I lost a lot of papers and lost a lot of clients. My income went down to probably about 40% of what it used to be, and it hasn't really much recovered. And of course, now with the print meltdown, that it makes it harder to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. What's kind of shocked me is how incredibly open mainstream people, particularly liberals, but also on the right, have been to this discussion. A lot of people have long felt this way, and they are, they come to my appearances by the hundreds, and it's kind of shocking. It's not because they think I'm awesome. It's because there's finally a forum to discuss this topic, the R word, the revolution word. And so it's kind of been amazing in that sense, and I was expecting far more pushback. I think in terms of the sense, what's really happening, though, is that it's kind of remarkable the silence that, the mainstream media has about a book called The Anti-American Manifesto that calls for the overthrow of the U.S. government. Now, you would think a book like that, published by a mainstream publisher, even if you thought it sucked, probably would deserve mention in, say, a newspaper. I would expect
you to end up on the TSA watch list.
Possibly, right? You just expect something, right? You'd expect that certainly, newspapers might savage it. But what's really been interesting is that even though the book is kind of like back in the 70s, Iron Maiden was routinely at the top of the charts, but their songs were never on radio, and it's kind of like that. The book is doing well, but it's all completely an underground word of mouth thing. The New York Times is never going to review it. They have, I guess, some historical romances they need to review instead. And, it's kind of amazing that this complete shutdown. The only television network that has even mentioned this book is MSNBC. I mean, even on the right, my enemies, like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity, don't dare bring it up, which I think is probably a tribute to the fact that I wrote, I think, a pretty good book. If it really was like ill-conceived and embarrassing and stupid, they probably would have talked about it. But I guess I did a good enough job that it's passable.
That's probably true. I'm holding in my hands a piece that you did, and the caption at the top says, "What Bush's torture memos can do for you." So this is obviously a Bush-era piece, but it applies today just the same because it really is not a partisan issue. They all want to rule the world. And in this particular piece, you've got a woman who's pulled over by a cop, and the cop says you were going 110 in a school zone. I could shoot you. And she pulls out a document which says it's a classified memo by the U.S. Justice Department that says that anything that you do is okay if it's to stop a terrorist attack. And in the final frame, you got her partner saying, "You shot a cop." He says, "Well, and she refers back to the classified memo that says you could do anything to stop a terrorist attack. Now, I find it very, very poignant and very, very pointed. I don't know if you're aware of it, in Funk and Wagnall's 1953 edition, Dictionary of the English Language, it defines terrorist government. This is the only place I found the definition. Terrorist government. And the definition is a government that rules by intimidation. Doesn't that make the United States a terrorist government? And is that the point of this piece?
Yeah, I mean, well, certainly its foreign policy is based entirely on intimidation. I mean, why else would we need to have over 600 military bases with a staff of between 3 and 4 million people under arms, stationed all over the world? Why would we need to invade countries that have no natural resources, like Afghanistan? And I know they found minerals. They're not going to get them out, though. Natural resources you can actually extract. Of course, the foreign policy is based entirely on intimidation. Why else do we care about being allied with Israel? Because Israel has nothing really worth mentioning.
You have to also admit the TSA airport security. That's
what I was going to get at. Yeah, we've had a police state here. I mean, especially after 9/11. I remember in the year 2000, when I was a talk show host in Los Angeles, I brought a bunch of my listeners out to post-Soviet Central Asia to travel through these dictatorships like Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. And you get stopped at checkpoints, you get shaken down for bribes. There's all these too many guys with big guns. You're constantly being harassed and hassled by the authorities. And I remember talking to people on the trip, and I said, everyone thinks that these people are going to start to look more like the United States, that we're the future and that these guys are the past. But think again. These guys are the future. We're going to be more like them. And that's exactly what happened after 9/11. I mean, the pat-downs and the scans. And again, an airport is it's a terror state. You go through, it's like when you don't feel like being happy, you get on an airplane. It makes you feel small, and it's ridiculous because none of it has anything to do with security. It's just about making you feel scared, not of terrorism, but of the state.
Which is intimidation, which is why, I asked the question about the U.S. being a terrorist government.
I think it is by definition
at least in its current form.
Right. Well, that's right. I mean, certainly I don't think that the U.S. government was sophisticated to be a terrorist state back, 100 years ago. It was certainly a nascent imperialist state, but that's a different matter.
Yeah. Now, have you had any problems in your field? I know you're an independent, but was there a point where you were involved with, say, I don't know, one of the syndicating agencies that decided to drop you because of your content, or an agent who decided that he wouldn't represent you anymore, or any of that kind of stuff? Have you ever hit a nerve? Maybe you did one piece and that one piece just wrong time, wrong place. Have you run into PC at all?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you can't draw political cartoons without running into PC. I mean, certainly the Washington Post and the New York Times dropped me as clients when I did cartoons that attracted the wrong kind of attention. They might say, well, that was just an issue of taste. That's always their official story. but it was not about taste. It was about politics. And in terms of, being dumped by a syndicate and that sort of thing, that's never happened. But, it's with me, it's been more a case. I guess it's like the people who are willing to work with me kind of know what I do, and they know what I am, and they tend to be okay with it, and they tend to stick it with me. But for me, it's like doors that fail to open in the first place that I noticed that probably would have opened if I, as my mom would say, was toned it down. So it's hard to believe that a guy who's been syndicated for 19 years. Has just finally had his first cartoon in USA Today. That's a kind of a normal thing to have, or but that happened 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Staff cartooning job at a newspaper is probably something that would have become open, certainly lesser lights, people who haven't won as many awards, people who don't have as many clients, people who aren't as well known have gotten jobs ahead of me. And they've told me, and editors have said, we just think you're too out there. We think you're too radical, too aggressive. And I'm like,
have
okay,
you,
sorry.
by any chance, have you either read or seen the movie The Fountainhead, Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead?
No, I haven't seen. I've read the book. I haven't seen the movie.
You read the book, then you're just telling the story of Howard Roark, who he would do it his way, and so he didn't get all of the clients. He didn't have, but those he had were devoted to him. You're telling the story of the Fountainhead.
Yeah, no, it is true. I thought of that, and it's very much like that. The people who respect what I do are fiercely loyal, and I've had the kind of support that could almost reduce me to tears sometimes because people have really come through for me. So my for instance, when I wanted to go to Afghanistan to research a book last summer, my fans raised $26,000 to cover my expenses and send me off. I guess maybe they didn't want me to come back, but it was definitely, that's true. But it's the doors that fail to open. It's that economic censorship that, we hear often people say, speaking of the dictionary, that, only the government can censor. And it's like, well, that's not true. According to the dictionary, a censor is anybody who's in a position to stop something from being published.
And on that note, Ted, I got to stop you because we're just about out of time. I want to make sure I give out your web information. And if you want more information about the Anti-American Manifesto and all the other work that Ted Rall does, go to www.rall.com. That's www.rall.com. I'm sorry we don't have more time, Ted. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. It was great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Ted Rall.